Can you hear
All
me?
right, looks like our speakers are all on. So welcome our speakers, and I do start the button right at 8 o'clock just for recording purposes. But those of you that are on early, even our speakers, if y'all don't mind retweeting the space and letting them know that we're live and we're going to be on. And then as speakers, we always go on mute. And so the mute button is on the bottom left also. And we go on mute in between our questions. That way everybody has a silent background because of course you're going to hear my dogs barking, but it also makes it really nice for whoever is speaking. And then I want to show everybody that's listening here, the bottom right, there's a little heart with a plus, and that gives you some claps and some hearts. And then as speakers, if you want to continue to add in between um, all of our questions, and you can raise your hand. There's a little hand emoji there that you can raise, and I'll come back to you, but we'll typically go in order. So I'll when I start the questions, I'll ask Coach Oresco first, and then I'll go to Stacy, and then Katrina, so because you're in order on my screen that way. So hope that is okay with everybody. But yes, listeners, if you could retweet it and let everybody know we're live, and it is 8 o'clock. And our topic here tonight is pitching, everything you want to know about pitching as a prospective student athlete. So super excited to bring on the speakers we have here tonight. And I'm going to introduce myself first, and then I'll go to Anthony, and then Stacy, and then Katrina. And Coach Oresco is Anthony. I have to get used to calling him Coach because I call him Anthony all day long. So I am Sherry Naldine. I'm the owner of Collegiate Sports Advocate. We are the #1 softball recruiting company in the country. We get the results. We stay with them until they graduate college. And we like to bring you all of these types of informational Twitter live spaces and bring special guests. So this is not just for our clients. That's why we welcome anyone out there. We want to share what our knowledge is and invite you all to learn and grow in the program. So Coach Oresco, I would love for you. Oh, wait, let me put one more disclaimer in here before you come off. I have to keep the audience on mute today. So if you have a question, go ahead and private message me, or some of you have my text, you can text me, because he is a D1 coach, and it is part of their compliance in order to not have direct questions from prospective student athletes. So Coach Oresco, please tell us your background, tell us where you're at today, tell us anything we need to know before we start asking questions.
Hello, thanks for having me. Glad I could hop on. It was a really convenient day. We traveled and played this weekend, and today was our off day, so I'm just sitting at home, getting ready for a few days of practice before we hop into our next series. But anyways, I guess intro background. I'm Coach Oresco. I'm pitching and catching coach at Lamar University. I'm also our recruiting coordinator. Second year here. We're in Beaumont, Texas. Like Sherry said, we're Division I. We're in the Southland Conference. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Background wise, I grew up in the men's fast pitch game. Grew up around that, playing that. My dad's a catcher. Was a catcher in men's fast pitch. He's a couple different Hall of Fames for that, and he's currently the head coach of the boys junior national team, 18 and under. So if y'all have any brothers that are teenagers that might want to play, that would be cool to send our way too. But yeah, he brought me into it. Started learning to pitch as a teenager. Spent some time with the junior national team and the men's national team player pool, while also competing in different men's fast pitch club level type stuff. Still do that a little bit, but with all the recruiting we do, it's a little bit tough to carve out time in the summer for it. Jumped into the college game as a student manager. I was with Mike White and the Oregon Ducks while I was getting my undergrad, 2015 to 2018. From there, went on to Ole Miss and did my GA there while I was getting an MBA. 2 years at Charlotte, and now I'm here at Lamar, getting these guys going. So that's kind of little introduction, a little background, just the broad strokes of where I've been and what I've done, and just really excited to get to answer some questions and share a little bit about our program and our philosophies.
Fantastic. Stacey, I'm going to pass it right on to you, Coach Gorsuch.
Hello, I'm Stacy Gorsuch. I am the pitching coach for 12U Texas Glory. Been coaching for a long, long time. I'm based out of Lewisville, Texas. I raised the pitcher. I have currently got one catcher who started out as a pitcher that is a freshman at the University of Oklahoma Christian. I don't know. It's one of those really long names. Been doing this for a long time. Grew up playing. I taught my daughter up until the age of 14, where I turned her over to somebody that knew a whole lot more than me, and I just love the game. So that's what I've decided to do in my free time, is to coach kids.
But don't forget to tell us who your daughter is and what she's doing today.
My daughter is Maribeth Gorsuch. She was a pitcher at LSU. She graduated in 2021 and is the current pitching coach at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona.
Exciting. Well, we welcome you, and we're going to pass it over to Katrina. So, Katrina, go ahead and come off mute and tell us all about yourself.
Hi, I am Katrina Sloan. I am on here, The Grind, which is the hitting facility I own. And I've been a pitching instructor for a little over 10 years in like the professional, if you want to call it that way, capacity. I've probably been teaching pitchers since I was 14 or 15. I was an umpire back in those days in Little League, and I would end up helping all of the little minor leaguers, is what we called them, learn how to pitch. So it's just kind of been part of my life since I was that age. I played softball at JUCO my freshman year and then went to Division II, where I finished out my college career. Ironically, as a catcher, third baseman is where I headed off as, and came home a pitcher, first baseman again. So a little bit of a different path for me as far as collegiate goes. What else? I think I hit on most of that. I'm based in Fort Worth. And right now I have probably a total of 20 plus pitchers. I'm working with all ages. I have a couple freshman, sophomore in college, all the way down to a 5-year-old is my youngest right now. So it is my side gig, believe it or not. I have a full-time job also, but I enjoy it and I don't mind the grind. No pun intended, of having that second job that keeps me really busy because I do enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, welcome to our speakers. We're super excited to have you guys. And again, if you can retweet, let people know we're on. I know we'll have a smaller group tonight because it's very specialized to pitchers. And it would be interesting, though, if the other people come listen, because it's always nice to know what you're going to have to face when you get in the batter's box. So the first question, I'm going to go in order of Anthony, Oresco, Coach Gorsuch, and Katrina, and just go ahead and come off mute as you hear the other person start to wind down, so I don't have to keep coming on. And then my first question is going to be out. What do you think or know that college coaches look for in a prospective recruit? Go ahead, Coach Oresco.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is that, all as coaches, we all can identify talent. We all have different preferences, things that we generally look for, but everyone also has different needs year to year and cycle to cycle, especially when it comes to pitching because of what you have and what you retain and things like that. I think some of the stuff that we really look for that can kind of separate some kids is a lot of the intangible stuff and stuff that kind of is more about their makeup than their talent, because a lot of the talent pieces, again, that's kind of speaks for itself in a lot of instances, but some things that I'm really looking for, kind of currently is what's the level of maturity of the athlete, pitcher or not? Do you know what you want? Have you thought through what's important to you in your next fit, whether that's distance from home, size of the school, coaching style, roster size, things like that? And can you clearly and confidently communicate as we start having those conversations in your recruitment process? And we get it, it's uncomfortable. It's the first time you're going through it in most cases, so we're really sensitive to that and try to help you through that. But it can be really easy to tell who's put some thought into it and who maybe hasn't quite yet. So I think that's a great thing to try to project as you're starting to go to camps and talk to coaches and do some different things, is really sit down and think about what's important to you. And that just tells me a little bit about the way you're approaching what you're doing, and following right or wrong from there. I think it's a little bit of coachability. Are you somebody who's able to take feedback, and are you in a situation with your travel ball coach, your high school coach, your private instructor, if you have one, where you're getting feedback, where there is an expectation around you? Are you being held to a standard day to day when you take the field, or is it more of a recreational style situation that you're in? And that can obviously vary as you move up from 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 and under type stuff, or even in the junior college stuff that we're recruiting out of now. But I think it's really important that you put yourself in a spot where you are being coached, you are being held accountable, and you learn to take that early on. Because once you get to college, it goes from where your whole life you've played, and maybe had a lesson during the week, to now in college, we're going to throw a lot of bullpens in the fall and spend a lot of time working with you one-on-one and kind of tweaking some things and getting a lot of feedback pitch to pitch and rep to rep. And that can be really overwhelming if you haven't experienced it before. So are you coachable? Are you mature? Are you coachable? And then one other piece for me to hit on would just be going from there into the ownership side of things. So yes, we always want a kid who's coachable, eager to learn, wants to take feedback. But once you're given that, do you have ownership over your process and your decisions and what you're doing to contribute to your own success, right? Is it on you at the end? Is your performance on you, or are you looking to kind of blame somebody else, find somebody else to put that onto? And can you problem solve? Because, at our level, we get 7 mound visits a game. Most games, I hope I have to use 0. If we're using more than 2, it's usually because we're making some changes. So, are you somebody that we can build a really strong relationship, and I know that you're absorbing what we're doing throughout the week in the bullpen so that I can trust you to problem solve and work through some stuff, whether we're behind in the count, whether we're working out of runners on base, some different things like that happen throughout the game, just those adversity pieces. And when you can constantly work in a mindset that, hey, this is on me, I can figure this out, I've been given the tools to work through this, because you're mature and know what's important to you, because you're coachable, and now you take control of your situation and your own results, I think that can be really powerful. So not to say the physical stuff isn't important, I'm sure we'll hit on that a little bit later, but I think a lot of times the separator is, as we get to know y'all and we build a relationship, is this somebody I'm going to be really happy spending as much time as we spend together in the bullpen, on the road, on the bus? Is that somebody I'm going to have a really good working relationship with, if that makes sense? Sherry, any follow-up or anything on that?
No, that's fantastic. I'm just going to hand it right over to Coach Gorsuch.
Perfect.
Well, I think this kind of is going to go at any level, but one of the things that I look for, and that I know that Maribeth mentioned to me when I told her I was going to do this, and I'm not a college coach, so I went to the source and I said, what is it you're looking for in a kid? And she said, once you get to the college level, of course you're talented. But most of all is, are you having fun doing this? Because, you play softball for such a short time, and you have to put so much heart and energy into it, and if it's not fun, you're gonna lose that love, and then you're gonna give up on it, because it is hard at that level. It is extremely hard. You're gonna question yourself, you're gonna question your decision to do this at this level, plus try to go to school and all the things that come with it. So do you love the game? Are you having fun playing the game? And then most of all, just a kid who's going to compete, that loves that pressure, that loves to go out there and put it all out there every single day for their team. So, those are real hard to gauge when you're recruiting a kid. But obviously, the competition thing, you can watch them play, but it's trying to determine, do they have the heart for this? Is this something that they have a passion for? And really, the mechanics of it all, every kid is going to be different. There's no one cookie cutter approach. And so, being coachable is important, and being able to take instruction and at least attempt to make those changes. Obviously, if you are good enough to get to the collegiate level, somebody comes and recruits you, you're obviously doing something right. But everywhere you go, somebody's going to want you to change something, and being able to take those recommendations and those suggestions and apply them. Kind of at a loss other than that.
No,
It's like,
that's great. No, that's awesome. We'll
yeah.
hand it over to Katrina. We have a whole list of questions, so we'll come back to you.
Okay, I think they touched a little bit on this, but what I talk to a lot of my kids about, and it starts almost, with my 10-year-olds even, is kind of that body language and what that looks like. I think that's what's going to get you noticed. Obviously, like they talked about, everybody's got that talent, and each school is looking for something specific for their, pitching rotation and what they need. But to get you noticed, it's going to be that body language. How do you respond to adversity? How do you respond to what you feel is a bad call? Is it showing on your face? Is it showing your body language? Do you shake it off? Do you power through? Do you keep moving? If they make an error behind you, Are you leading your team through that, or are you showing your frustration on your face? And I think when they're younger, they have no idea what they're showing. And that's where I've kind of started with the young ones, and letting them realize, what I'm seeing from them, even just in a lesson that they don't intend to show. And then, as we get to our older kids that are in that recruiting process, like, you have to come off the mound after a bad inning, or when you get pulled, showing that you're there for your team and you can shake that off and you can still be that leader in the dugout, because you're going to have bad outings even in college. And a coach doesn't, care that you had a bad outing as much as they care how you handle it when you walk off the field. And that's, all the way down to the select level too. And just making sure they're conveying that the mental strength they have in those moments.
Excellent. And I'll go on to Coach Oreska with the next question is, what type of pitches should they be focusing on today, or mechanics, so that they can get to the collegiate level?
Yeah, a lot of times I think, coming up, less can be more. I think a lot of kids kind of chase trying to do a little bit of everything, and I'd really rather do one thing really, really well, one thing that's really exceptional, rather than having five or six very average pitches. So for me, really starting from the ground, my first thing would just be fastball command. Are we able to throw strikes to both sides? And everything mechanically is going to build off your fastball. In a perfect world, shouldn't be these crazy exaggerated movements to throw east, west, up, or down off of that. So if we can pound the zone with strikes to both sides with the fastball, we're going to be able to develop movement pitchers as you move into your teenage years and into college off of that. So that would be probably step one, would be just having fastball command, being able to throw strikes to both sides, and from there being able to change speeds. Some type of changeup, there's a lot of good ways to do it. And I've won a lot of games as a coach, as a player, just being able to go hard, soft, and fill up the strike zone. So that would be my starting point. From there, I think it's important to really just figure out what your ball does naturally and try to build around that. So as you're throwing your fastball, some people it's really clean, end over end, 12-6 spin, basically like a peel drop ball, and we're going to build off that with something spinning down, working the bottom of the zone. But some kids have a little bit more natural curve, natural screw, maybe something with backspin. So really figuring out, okay, what does my ball do naturally without me trying to do anything? Is it topspin or is it backspin? And that's going to tell you a lot about what that first or second movement pitch is probably going to come the most naturally for you. I know when I was learning the pitch, I wanted to be a rise ball pitcher so bad, because in the men's game, that's how you win games, with swing and misses and rise balls, and that's kind of the flashy way to do things. And I was blessed and cursed with really good natural 12-6 topspin, and everything out of my hand was straight down, straight down, straight down. So I was able to really figure out how to throw an effective drop ball and a changeup off it, and eventually later on was able to get a rise ball to change the eye level with. But I think less can be more. Don't go and try to fill up your call card with rise, drop, curve, change, true, drop, curve, knuckleball, all that kind of stuff. Like, okay, let's make sure we can throw fastball effectively both sides for a strike. Let's change speeds, and whatever movement pitch makes sense off of that. Let's start there, but we really shouldn't be adding pitch 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6 until we have a really good grasp on what's right in front of us. In terms of recruitment for me, I'm a little bit more partial to a north-south type pitcher with rise and drop, just coming from the men's game, as opposed to more curve screw. But we recruit both. We have both on our staff. I think being able to complement your bullpen with pieces that do things a little bit differently is important, and the development plan is going to look a little bit different for those types of pitchers. But that's just a little bit of where I come from and how I get there on that.
Excellent. Stacy, what do you have?
So I agree with all of that. I work with younger pitchers, so they come in, and I get a lot of them that have 4 or 5 pitches, and they all look exactly the same, and none of them do what they're supposed to do. So we go back to the fundamentals, and we learn to execute our fastball to both sides of the plate. Then we start introducing, what do you have to do to make, if you need to be a little more down in the zone, a little more up in the zone. And then changing speeds. The changeup is vital to every pitcher. And anybody tells you that you don't need a changeup, I beg to differ. Maribeth says the same thing. You've got to be able to throw hard and slow it down. It changes everything. And then being able to move up and down. My daughter was a rise ball pitcher. She loved it, but she also got to college, and they're like, well, you got to learn to throw down too. So she did not develop a drop ball pitch until she got to college. She was a curveball, rise ball pitcher. She could throw a screw. She did throw a lot of them, but she perfected that in college. So there's so much growth once you get to the collegiate level. But I think what catches most people's eyes is you've got command of the pitches that you do throw. So you can throw 5 pitches poorly, or you can throw 3 pitches really, really well. And those kids are the ones that are catching more eye, because when that kid throws that ball, she's throwing it for a strike. She can throw it ahead, even behind in the count, and get batters, looking, and get them chasing too.
Yes, I just want to scream. Can you say it louder for the people in the back on the number of pitches that these kids think they have to have? I tell most of my kids, we may go through the gambit of them, learning them throughout to figure out what their best pitch is going to be sometimes. But I've had pitchers come to me that literally have all of them plus a knuckle curve and a knuckle screw. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, tell me what your top 2 pitches are. And we're going to learn to throw those anywhere in the zone, anywhere in the count, and throw them with confidence. Like, if you can't do that with these pitches, you don't have these pitches. And I think that's kind of where we start at that next level, is trying to take their number 1 pitch and make it even better, fine tune it. If we're a curveball pitcher, we're going to throw it backdoor. We're going to throw it a little bit low. We can throw a little bit high if we want to. If we're a rise ball pitcher, can we throw it with confidence that it's going to break through the strike zone, or do we always have to throw it at the top of the strike zone? And then, like you said, we're going to go back and learn a drop ball too, because if that's what we're doing, we got to be able to go both ways. But just really perfecting a couple of them is like all I preach. Preach, preach, preach.
Fantastic. And I hope there wasn't a pause waiting for me there. I always forget to turn off my incoming calls, and I had a Twitter which completely takes me off of the sound until that Twitter call goes away, even if I decline it. So I apologize, and I'll be better at blocking those. I said that last week too. So now I want to switch to asking, are there certain metrics? Like, when do you as a college coach engage? We hear so much 60 or plus, or how do you measure spin when you're out there? Or are you guys as clinicians doing the spin rate so that you understand? Or I had one college coach say to me, I don't care how fast or how much spin, I want to see them miss and swing and miss. So she says that I count swing and misses more than I look at the detail of the pitches. So Coach Oresco, what do you say?
Well, my boss, Coach Hooks, she'd tell you I'm a numbers guy. Like, I am definitely into the metrics and stuff, but certain arenas, certain scenarios make it easier or harder to use some of that. So I think camp's a great time for us to get into some of it. I do believe in the numbers and following some of that stuff. I do think it's a little bit more of a sliding scale with the speed movement piece of some of that. So there's not really a super hard number of you have to throw this hard all the time. I think the harder you throw, the more forgiving we're going to be on the spin, because, hey, I've got a job to do to bring you in and develop you and make you better. So if we're 65, 66 and flat, but I believe we can make it move a little bit, we're going to have a lot of success. And the same is true on the flip side. If we're high 50s, 57, 58, but the ball's really got some spin to it, okay, we can see if we can add a little bit to the speed, but the spin's going to be why we have some success. So, I try not to make it black and white or cookie cutter. I think, the more we have of one thing, the more we can get away with not having of the other in the short term, and really trust our process and our bullpen to be able to develop some of that. So definitely looking at metrics on speed in terms of just velocity, and then change of speed with that. But then on the movement side of things, we have the Rapsodo, so we're using a lot of that to get vertical break, spin rate, spin efficiency, some of those numbers, just to get an idea. And that's where camp comes in super handy in terms of recruiting. We can go and identify some people out in travel ball, and swing and miss is usually a really great sign that the ball's doing what it's supposed to do, but not always sure what the caliber of hitter you're facing. So getting in a camp setting where we can document some of that, record some of that, and see what it is, just makes it a little bit more tangible for us. And I know more and more private instructors and facilities are investing in some of that stuff to be able to have it. I would say, as you're advertising some of that to us, I'm a little bit more interested when it's coming from you of where are we consistently at, where are we living in terms of velo and spin rate, and not so much what that one outlier peak can be sometimes. Because if you send me an email and it's, hey, I throw 64 and my ball's got 1,300 spin on my rise ball, and I come and watch you play and it's 5960 on the gun, now that breaks down the trust just a hair before we even start that relationship. Now, when you come to camp, I'm going to sit there and say, well, she consistently was in this range, but she flashed this, and I'm willing to go and take a chance and invest in the ceiling there because I feel like with that little tweak, we can go and get there all the time. But just make sure you're setting yourselves up for success as you're marketing yourself. Of if you tell us you're top 1% and then we go see you and it's not quite that, that can sometimes send the wrong message. So I think, yes, we're looking at that stuff. It does matter. It is a little bit of a sliding scale, in my opinion. But I don't know that there's a hard line of, hey, this is D1, this is Power 5, this is JUCO, or anything like that. I think it's very case by case because they don't tell the whole story. They just help quantify certain pieces of it.
So I have a hard time speaking to this because I'm a numbers girl. I'm an accountant for a living, so I love studying the numbers. I love that piece of it. But at the same time, I have a staff of kids that I've got a kid who throws super hard, but her pitches tend to be a little flat, and sometimes she gets hit a whole lot harder than my spinner, who spins the heck out of the ball and can place it anywhere you ask her to and get those swings and misses or get those weak ground balls. And I think she's as effective and as important as my flamethrower. And I think when I talked to Maribeth about this, she said the same thing. It's like she's got a staff, and she's got her hard thrower, and what she works on with her is getting more spin with that velocity. And then she's got spinners and she's working with them on getting a little more velocity. So I think that where you want to go to school, you have to kind of look and see what it is that they're looking for, and work on those things. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you are a spinner, you've got to embrace that, and know that when you get to school, they're going to work on your weaknesses and help you expand on your strengths. So I don't think that you can prescribe to any one type of philosophy. You've got kids out there that throw really hard, and a coach may look at them and say, I'm going to invest in this kid because she's got that velocity piece. I can teach her how to spin it. Or they may look at the spinner and say, that's something that's harder to teach, and I want that kid. I can get her bigger and stronger in the weight room, and I can get some velocity on her. So I think you have to do what you do really well, and then know that you're looking for a fit who's going to not only take what you do well and embrace it and let you go with it, but they're also going to develop you into an even better pitcher.
I'm kind of like Stacy. I think I've got, probably my number one right now out all my kids is definitely a spinner. And I used to always talk about her like, she's not a strikeout pitcher. That's not what she does. She gets ground balls, she gets pop out. She's very successful. And in the last year and a half, she's grown, she's gotten smarter, and she is a strikeout pitcher. She doesn't throw super hard yet. And, she's probably never going to throw super hard. We're cruising in the mid 50s right now. But she's a strikeout pitcher because she took what she knew how to do and she used it to her advantage. And I think that, you're going to have that mix. And I always tell her, you're always going to compliment, a fireballer be behind. It's okay to have 2 of those on the team or 3 of those on the team. You guys are going to compliment each other. Well, if they hit her, they're not going to hit you, and vice versa. So I think, as far as the metrics and the spin rate, like, it was good to kind of hear Coach Resco talk about that, because it's something we've been talking about investing in our facility. We were curious to know how beneficial that could be to our kids. And it sounds like that's the next step we need to take for those numbers people to be able to have it. I'm not so much a numbers person, so it's good to hear the advice. But I think, on the other side of the numbers, I look at the more successful things. How many strikeouts do they have? What's the earn run average? The number of hits. Like, those are the numbers I kind of look at with my kids, so they can understand you can be successful throwing hard and changeups, and you can be successful throwing the ball that moves across the plate. So.
Fantastic. I love it. So the follow-up question would be, how many pitchers do you think is a good staff on a college team? I've seen this change over the last 10 years. I mean, it used to be, you had the one big superstar and a couple other to support you. Now it seems to be pitching by committee. What do you say, Coach?
Yeah, well, first, I think these guys nailed it. They said it a lot cleaner than I said it on the metrics and some of that stuff. And Stacy really pointed out the location piece of that as well. When we talk about metrics, it's easy to sit there and say speed and movement, but being able to command that is extremely important as well, whether you're a spinner or a hard thrower or somewhere in between. To me, throwing strikes, not walking people, that's just control. Are we around a strike zone? Having command is really throwing it where you want to throw it. And some of those harder throwers that are ever able to have some success at a younger age, the learning curve in college sometimes is, oh gosh, like mid 60s on the middle third gets hit now, right? So being able to pitch is kind of what layers right on top of some of that stuff. And these guys nailed it. I think they said it way better than I could on the metrics. But anyways, to answer your follow up on the numbers of pitchers as a staff, I do think the game is trending that way, like you said, of more of a staff effort, and we've definitely got that right now. We've got a smaller staff this year, just as we've transitioned some things with our recruiting, where we only have 4. I think a really good number right now is 6. Some places are going larger. 6 is great for me because at that point I can still individualize it really, really well day to day, especially in the fall. We do a lot of bullpens where it's just one pitcher. The most pitchers I ever have at a time is 2. You start getting to the double-digit size staffs, it comes hard to make your day work and to have the catchers to support that and do some other things. So to me, in a perfect world, I'd probably have 6. That's assuming the kids we're bringing in are help us right now type of kids. I know some places that have a little bit more of a long-term developmental plan that maybe redshirt some pitchers early on could go a little bit larger. But for me, I'm looking for, okay, how can I use this person early on in their career and what can we develop them into as they progress throughout their career. So, like they said, we have some pitchers that really complement each other well right now with the 4 that we have. We have some varying velocity ranges, some down ball kids, some up ball kids, some kids that change speeds a little bit more often than others, and that makes everything kind of come together. I mean, if you watch the College World Series down the stretch last year, you had Texas, Oklahoma State in the biggest games of the year, elimination games and late innings, using their second, third, and sometimes fourth pitcher. Because the game's evolving from a hitting standpoint as well, and it is hard to go and throw the same kid at him over and over and over again. So it is important to have a lot of pieces, and that's huge. So yeah, for me, I think in a perfect world, I'd probably have 6. Really happy with the 4 we have right now, though, and what we're building there and the experience they're able to get and keep each other healthy and work off of each other.
And Stacy, next question might be a little different for you, and since you actually coach a team too, and it's hard to keep all those pitchers happy and get them enough innings to develop too. So, what are your thoughts?
Right. So, my choice is I would have 9 pitchers, 2 catchers, and a shortstop, and they would all be able to play other positions. But ideally, I can keep 4 happy. Obviously, we play a lot more games we try to play a lot more games in a weekend than maybe you do at college. I do know that I asked Maribeth this question as well, and I said, what's your ideal staff number? And she said the same thing. She said 6. Obviously, at the younger ages, they all want to be the 4-hole hitter. They want to play shortstop when they're not pitching, and trying to get them to understand that as they get older, they probably are going to be able to play multiple positions and pitch and hit and do all those things. But when you really look at the collegiate level, the pitchers that are hitters as well and play when they're not pitching are very few and far between. Does it happen? Absolutely. But I think that if you are going to specialize in something, pitching, catching, that sort of thing, you have to put so much more into it than you do any of those other positions. And to be able to do multiple, they only have so much time in a day that you're allowed to practice. And so working with your pitchers and that has got to be a priority. So for me, I'd have a bunch of them, but I know I can keep 4 happy because that's what I'm doing now. But I'd really like to have 6, because if you get one that gets hurt, and that can ruin a weekend or a season if it's a long-term injury. So 4 to 6 is probably the magic number.
And I have really no experience on this topic, for being completely honest. I think, with my kids that are not, the ones I have in college are on teams that pretty big. I would say, they're a small school. 4 or 5 total. At one point they had like 6 to 7. And I was like, oh my gosh. But then sure enough, 2 were hurt and they were really thankful they had what they had. The first thing I do, ask my kids when they join a new team, how many pitchers are on the team? And, what do they throw? What, put them in order for me. What do they throw? Let's make sure we can complement that staff because that's going to keep you on the mound. So I think, Coach Erisco talked about the complementary staff. And that's the first thing I try to give my kids if I can, if they've joined a new team or they're a little bit newer in the pitching arena. So we're at that step to learn another pitch. What do all the pitchers on your team throw? Okay, well, this might be a good pitch for you then. And it's going to work with where you're at. And let's complement that staff so y'all all can keep having success and get that mound time.
And Katrina, I love it. And I'm going to add to that because I think it's a really important when you are looking for a travel team or a college in your recruiting process, you have to know where you fit in and whether or not you will add value and, whether or not it's complementary to the staff. So I thought that was a great follow-up from a clinician's point of view and not being a coach. So this one might also be out to all of you. But are you seeing things change in college pitching? And have there been big changes in the past? And what's your insight that you see today?
For me, what I've been seeing the last handful of years in general is that you're seeing softball typically follow 5-ish years behind Major League Baseball and whatever's going on because softball is getting better and better at having resources, having people that are really into doing the research, doing the homework. But reality is the vast, vast resources that Major League Baseball has to track stuff, to measure stuff. They're just going to figure out what works for their sport a little bit faster. And then we're going to slowly evolve and adapt that into what works in our sport. So you started seeing that in hitting a handful of years ago. You're starting to see that more with catching. Some infield shifting type stuff, different things that were maybe becoming mainstream a handful of years ago in baseball are now kind of getting more and more common in softball. And I think the same is true pitching wise. And I think that's part of, okay, staffs are getting a little bit bigger. People aren't just riding the one arm, starting to understand the benefits of pitching by committee, paying more attention to workload, paying more attention to matchups, different scouting techniques that are kind of slowly coming over from baseball as we have more access to video on hitters, data on hitters, advanced analytics on hitters, things like that. So I think you'll see a little bit more of a data-driven approach sooner than later, especially at the high Power 5 SEC level with a lot of money to go and buy some things. So more kinematic type stuff like you're seeing with S2 Breakthrough and some of those companies, more ball flight data. Where you've had Rapsodo and some of those things, but now you're getting more schools that have a Flight Scope or Yacker Tech, somebody that's tracking that during games. So, historically, I can set up the Rapsodo in the bullpen and tell you what your rise ball does without a hitter in the box. Now you're starting to get to where you can see that in game at some places and track exactly what your ball is doing, exactly where your locations are, and some of that stuff. So, the more technology that comes into the sport, the more measurables there are. And it's going to be up to us as coaches to figure out how much is too much and where to find that sweet spot to be able to use some of that to our benefit and apply it without really overwhelming everything. So, generally speaking, I think that's the main thing to pay attention to is what's really popular, what's hot button today in Major League Baseball. And if you fast forward to 2026, 2027, I wouldn't be surprised if that's really what you're seeing in softball. Obviously, pitching is the least comparable action of the two sports, but in terms of game strategy, I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the baseball crossover. And I'm not a baseball guy by trade. I grew up in softball, grew up in fast pitch, but definitely see a lot of those trends, and then just a lot more science behind mechanics and emotion and different things as it becomes more measurable and there's more people willing to share what they've had success with and bring good information to girls at a younger and younger age. So all good stuff on the horizon that I think will help us when they get to the collegiate level.
I watched the progression of, you go from one arm to a staff with Maribeth going through college. So in the 5 years that she was there, when she went in, there were 2 arms and there were 2 kids who came in if they got in trouble. Up to her final year in college, it was they may make a change mid-game. And it's not because the pitcher that was on the mound at that time was not throwing well. It was that these hitters are so good these days that they're able to make those in-game adjustments. So if you've got a rise ball pitcher out there and she's getting them over and over again the first 2 or 3 innings, and then come the fourth inning they're starting to make contact on her, they would just make a switch to maybe somebody who's a down ball pitcher. And so I think the staff mentality type thing is really kind of here to stay. um, Obviously every pitcher, every staff, you want that ace that, no matter what's happening, you can throw them in there. But I think as hitters get better, you're going to see more and more colleges take that we have a staff of pitchers and they all do something really well different than the others. And you may see more of that. She's not throwing bad, but they're starting to get their timing on her, so we're making a switch.
I think too, like one thing that really surprised me in all my experience in that is definitely what I see on TV these days. But just the other day, and this is terrible that I couldn't even tell you which team it was because I watched a whole bunch of games in a row one day on Flow. But they made a switch to a lefty because they had two lefties come. The other team had two lefties coming up in the lineup. She pitched to the first batter, and they went right back to their starter, the next batter, because the other team put in a pitch hitter. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a baseball move. We literally put a pitcher out there for one batter and put the starter right back in. So I think, what he touched on as far as us picking up from baseball and making some of those matchups happen, they're doing it even more so. At least they're trying it out at some of the schools. So it's interesting to see and watch the changes.
Love it. Love it. And then this one is kind of your closing comment, because I'm saying, are there bad habits or types of things that athletes are doing today that they should be working to overcome, or that they're getting to you that you wish would be fixed earlier? And before we all close out too, make sure that you all are following our speakers, because this has been a fabulous session so far. So Coach Oresco, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll probably stay in the same arena that I stayed in on the what are you looking for type of conversation, where the physical stuff is really case by case, and there's certain things that can be fixed that I probably wouldn't recruit just because I'm not very good at fixing. And there's other issues that come in. It's like, oh, I can handle that. We'll fix that really quick. So the physical stuff, it's hard to put it all in one basket because that's going to be different from pitching coach to pitching coach. I think to me, the habits, obstacles is a lot more of the mindset, mental side of things. And, people talk a lot about how athletes think and how kids think and operate these days. And I think generally just the culture of instant gratification and an overemphasis on the results we're getting can be a big obstacle for players when they get to us early in that first fall. Players, they tend to want it all, and they want it all right this minute. And that's great because we're all passionate. We're all perfectionists. Pitchers, if you're not that, you're probably not a pitcher for very long, because that's really a lot of what it takes sometimes. So that passion, that love for it is great. But I think learning to develop trust in a process is really important, and being able to trust that even when you're not seeing immediate results. Understanding that some of those results may take time as you adjust to a different level of competition, a different coaching style, a different role than you've had, things like that. It's not always going to be the magic potion, the quick fix that gets you from A to B in a hurry. Sometimes it's a fall, sometimes it's a weekend, sometimes it takes the time it takes, and you can't really cheat experience a lot of times. And just being able to stay present, stay pitch to pitch, and stay where your feet are, for lack of a better term, as opposed to chasing the quick fix, the quick solution. Really being able to invest and trust in your own process and what makes you what you are, is probably the biggest thing. And right along with that would just be a little bit over dependent on the circumstance you're in, and kind of a lack of ownership that you see at times. As you're learning to be an adult on a college campus for the first time, experiencing a lot of different things. But to me, as a player, your coaches are there to facilitate your growth. We're providing a lot of logistics, a lot of structure. We're providing you some feedback, technically, tactically, providing some help with the emotional and a mental side of the sport as well. But as a player, you're going to have the responsibility to process that information, translate it into something that makes sense to you, and apply it. And then if that brings you success, awesome. Now we got to make sure we retain it, right? So that when stuff's hitting the fan, you're able to kind of be your own answer, make your own adjustment, not putting your success or failure in somebody else's hand, not letting somebody else be the reason that you succeed or fail. whether that's a coach, whether that's an umpire, whether that's a catcher, whether that's an error at short, right? Finding a way to put it back into something that you can control and managing your controllables and not allowing the blame to shift anywhere but squarely back on yourself. And I think Stacy said it in the very first answer, making sure that you're having fun and loving what you're doing. If that's where you're at, that's going to come really easy. If you're not in that mindset, if you're not in a place where you're really in a situation where you're able to be yourself and enjoying that part of your life, that's going to be really hard. But to me, it's just being careful about expecting everything to happen overnight. Being careful about getting caught up in the results. We've had some games this spring where we've pitched really well and the stat sheet does not look very good. Those days happen. And then making sure that you can be your own solution sometimes and you can process what's being told to you, not just be a robot. We want you guys to grow. We want you guys to mature as people and take ownership of your career and make your experience what you want it to be and not just rely on us for everything, if that makes sense.
I think I would have to say that you got to remember this is a team sport. So you have to know that there's going to be good and there's going to be bad. Don't place blame. Um, Everybody's going to have great games. Everybody's going to have terrible games, and then there's some that everything's going to come together, and you're going to be firing on all four cylinders. But no one person loses a game, and no one person wins a game. It is a team sport, and just being a good teammate. When things are bad, the more you can pick those up around you, the better they're going to play. And just, I see a lot of blame, and I see a lot of my kid was great, but they're just not on a good team. And sometimes maybe that's true, but if you're teaching your kid to walk away when it gets tough, that's not really a lesson that's going to serve them well in life or in softball. So I would say that one of the things that tends to be a little bit of a trend these days is, if things aren't going your way, just move on. And there is absolutely a time and a place where you're not in a good situation and you need to go, but I don't think that should be your first move. If you are not safe, or you're not being treated appropriately, then yes, move on. But if your team is just struggling, then what can you do to help make it better? Because it's not about any one person; it is about the team. And I know that doesn't always translate in the recruiting process, but that speaks to who you are as a person. If your first move is to walk away when things get tough, that probably is not going to be something that a college coach is going to say, "Ooh, I want that kid on my team." Just sometimes you just have to stick with it and stay the course, and things will get better.
I definitely, echo all of what they were saying, but I kind of thought about this question a little bit different way. And as far as something that I think I see from the older girls, they kind of stop working at some point, and not necessarily consciously and not like completely, but they reach a level of success, and we don't see that same focus on the little things that got them there. So having to back them away, and we're not just going to throw today. Let's back off. Let's just really dial in your spin on this pitch today. We're going to spend a ton of time on spin. We're going to do all the boring stuff we did when we first started learning it, but to make it better. And I think that, like I said, they reach that level of success and they just start going through the motions when they're putting in their work versus really focusing on it and putting that work in an effective way that's going to let them keep growing and keep perfecting their skill, and not just plateauing where they're at.
Excellent. And we have a question from the audience. And again, if any of you want to ask questions, you can either text me or private message. But this one came up is, I know there's a study going into softball pitch count. Wondering if any of the speakers have any thoughts on pitch count with softball pitchers. Anthony, you want to go first, or Coach Oreska?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this year is probably the first year I've really been specific in tracking that throughout the weekend and throughout the season. And that's not to say it's driving any of the decisions we make. It's just one variable to have the information. And we've been trying to keep them in a certain range throughout the year, but it's not really dictating our decision making at this point. I think a lot of people are looking at pitch count in game. I think one thing to consider as you're trying to figure that out is also your pitch count throughout the week or your pitch count throughout the warm up. I think there's a big difference from baseball to softball and how much a baseball pitcher throws pregame to go on the mound as opposed to how much a softball pitcher does that. So, it can be great that we throw so few pitches to get through a game, but if we're overloading on the front end of the week or if we're overloading pregame, that does play a role as well. So as you're trying to figure out, or as I'm trying to design bullpens, how much is too much, how much is too little, there is a concern in there and some awareness there of what are we doing to get ready, what is typical, what is our routine, and then what is more than that. So we can kind of build it up. People I've talked to have kind of said, we want to be in a certain range for a weekend, but looking at, a 2-week span of how much they're being used can be really effective. So that's kind of something I've paid attention throughout the year and kind of learn as we go of, okay, maybe this kid broke down at this point and we hadn't gotten to that point previously. So is that something that we had to build up to be able to handle that capacity, or is that a little bit too much? I think it really is case by case, person by person. And, at the college level, they're doing a lot more than just throwing the game with their weight room, with their arm care work, with their bullpen work. It's a little bit different maybe than at the travel ball level, where you're throwing a lot more games and there's not as much practice to go with it. But we harp on our pitchers all the time. The more efficient we can be, the better. If we can get through games right around the 100 pitch mark and not go with 130, 140, 150 pitches to get 7 innings, that can be really, really good for us. I think the lowest we got this year was a 7-inning game on 88 pitches. So that's really good. If we're working in that, I feel pretty confident that we can go and get 2 quality starts out of a kid on a weekend. But the range we've kind of worked in right now is trying to stay below kind of the 200 pitch mark over a calendar week. And that's worked out well with the 4 that we have that have been able to take innings from us. So definitely a work in progress, something that's on the horizon, I think, for softball. But I haven't met anybody who's really set a hard line and figured it out quite like they've seemed to figure it out in baseball quite yet.
Well, and I echo that. It's a really long season, and if you've got a kid that can throw a bunch of pitches in a weekend or in a week, and they don't seem to tire out, you've got to remember that, are you going to have that kid at that same strength and at that same velocity and being able to execute those pitches over the long haul? So, ultimately, the championship is what you're looking for, whether it be the College World Series or, your conference championship, or in my case, the national championship at the end of the year, whichever one your team chooses to play in. The ultimate goal is to get everybody there healthy and at their peak performance. So while early in the season they may be able to throw more, you got to think in terms of what is this going to be look like at the end of the season. And so I try to, in games that I can, go a couple innings with one, switch to another one, and go from there. That's what I try to do. Because ultimately, especially at the younger age, I have to think about their futures, and their future is to pitch for their high school team and then make it to college and be an impact player at the collegiate level. So I that's why I like a larger staff, is that so that I don't put all of my eggs in one basket and hope that this one kid is going to pitch me to a national championship. Obviously you tend to have that one kid that when in any game situation that they are your go-to. But at the same time, it's like, from weekend to weekend, that kid may be different, and it's where they are mentally, where they are physically, and just trying to keep them healthy for an entire season.
I think that's kind of, I don't have a pitch count reference for sure. But I do have a lot of high school athletes right now pitching through some things they probably shouldn't be. And I think for me, it's really helping them understand, you've got to speak up. You're your own advocate. But also, what's hurt, what's sore, what's injured, with the younger ones, you got to kind of start there and help them understand that. We can be hurt and keep playing. If we're injured, it's different. We can be sore and there's not a problem, but those kids knowing their bodies and knowing and being and speaking up. And then sometimes we have to be the adult or the coach and put our foot down and say, hey, I know you want the ball this game, or I know you're coming up against your rival in high school this week, but you don't need to pitch that whole game, if any of it. You know, they can get by without you. You can win this game without you. Don't go begging for the ball. Give yourself a break, reset, get ready for next Tuesday. You know, and that's what I'm seeing a little bit of a struggle from some of my high school varsity pitchers right now, is that constant either need or feeling of obligation to have the ball when they really need to take a small break and their team can do it without them on the mound. And just trying to get them to feel mentally strong enough and confident that they can have those conversations with their coaches and still do right by their team and themselves.
Well, fantastic. What a great group and panel of speakers here tonight with exceptional backgrounds and information to provide to our audience. And I want to ask our audience if you'll message me or text me and tell me what you want to hear next, because we get these topics from what you guys want to learn from and what you want to hear and what's happening out there. And I'm happy to, provide these types of speakers and the connections to continue the knowledge of this, the softball environment. So, collegiate sports advocate owner, you can find us at sports.com. You will see all of our spaces, all of our Twitter recordings, and all of our podcasts listed on the bottom of our website. So if you go take a look and say, wow, they just recently did that topic, but boy, we haven't heard this one in a while, I'd love to bring it out. I've got a handful of partners on our page that we work with quite often and them in as needed to meet the needs of our listening audience. Again, thanks for our tonight and our clinicians, and make sure you follow us before we hang up and give us a little love, and then please reshare this. You can reshare the space after it's over. That's how we grow this, and that's how we continue to grow the game. So thank you again, everybody, and have a good night. We'll see you next Monday. Give me some topics. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, so I need you all. Have a great night.